I'm Kaylee, and today I'm talking about how to read really long classics. Anytime that you commit to a really long book, and I'm talking like over 500 pages, it's quite a commitment. It's kind of a big deal. It's a big book. But somehow when it's a classic, there's just that extra density in the writing that makes it even more of a big deal. So today we're going to go over some tips and some advice and some ideas about how to make it not such a big deal, not so much of an intimidating thing to try. Hopefully with these ideas and little bits of advice, then you will feel confident to tackle some longer classics. Before we dive into some of the ideas about how to tackle longer classics, let's grab our Booktuber Shoutout book here, and we're going to shout out somebody randomly. Today's shout out goes to the Book Geek. I will leave a link to their channel down in the description, so be sure to go over there and subscribe to them. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe to this channel and give this video a thumbs up. So my first piece of advice when you're tackling a really long book, just take your time. Don't feel like you have to have it all read within a week or within a month or within the year. As long as you're reading a little bit every week or whenever you feel like diving into that book, just take your time. And there is no time pressure here. There's no pressure as far as when you have to finish it. That being said, if you are a person who is motivated by a little bit of time pressure, you could set yourself a goal of so many pages per day, or even just say, I want to have this finished by the end of the month. And that might be that little extra bit of motivation that you need to get you reading. It kind of depends on your personality type. If you want to put time pressure on yourself, you can, or you can just say, no time pressure. I don't want it. I finished this when I finish it. I don't care when that is. The second thing to think about, especially with a really long classic that's going to take a while, is whether you want to just focus on this book, only read that big long classic, and you are just going to dive in and you're going to finish it and you're going to knock it out and get it all finished. Or do you want to kind of take a break from that and read something else like a shorter novella or maybe a graphic novel or just something else that's really easy, and then you're kind of refreshed and then you can come back to your big, dense, long classic. So again, it kind of depends on your personality type and what motivates you and what you think will work for you. Sometimes if you just focus on that book, you can get really bogged down, especially if it takes you a month or 2 or 3 to read and that's all you're reading. It can kind of get, I don't know, maybe a little monotonous. And you're like, I just need a break. But then again, on the other side, if you take a break with other books, you're just getting distracted with other books. And then, no, I need to come back to my classic again and read that one. So it kind of depends. For myself, I usually take a break. And not just with long classics. This is pretty much any books that I'm reading. I usually have a book that I'm reading, and then I have some sort of comic, graphic novel, picture books, something that I have going on as well. And then I usually have a nonfiction. So at any given time, I'm usually reading at least 3 books from like different styles and different genres. And I found that that really works for me over the years, but that might not work for you. You kind of have to figure it out and find out what works for you. Another thing to consider is maybe doing a buddy read or a readathon. Of course, Booktuber is going on right now. So that's the perfect time to join in. There's lots of excitement in October about classics. And so you kind of get all excited along with everybody else. And that's that perfect motivation to tackle a long classic and get going with it. So a buddy read or a read along or a readathon or reading sprints or something like that can really, really help to kind of eat up those miles, eat up those pages with a long classic. The third piece of advice is to set realistic goals. You could say so many pages per day, or I'm going to read for 30 minutes a day. What I've done before sometimes is I'll put little sticky notes every 50 pages. So I can say, okay, I read my 50 pages for the day, I just have to read to the next sticky note. That way it's a visual reminder, it's a very visual thing of where I have to get to next in the book. Okay, now I have to read to the next sticky note, and tomorrow I read to the next sticky note. Half the time, whenever I get to that sticky note, I'm all into the story and I just keep on reading past my sticky note. But whatever goals you set for yourself, whether it's I'm gonna finish it by the end of the month, or whether it's I'm going to read 50 pages today, or whatever it is, make sure that they're realistic, that it's something that you really can do. And make sure that it really fits into your schedule. Like, sure, on a Friday, I can sit down and read for an hour, no problem. But on Saturdays, I'm really busy. Saturdays, I'd be lucky to find 10 minutes to be able to sit down and read. So I have to make sure that it fits within the time frame of my actual life. My fourth piece of advice kind of has to do with whether or not you're a very visual person, like whether or not you have a lot of like spatial awareness in space of what's going on. If you are a very spatially aware person, it can kind of backfire on you almost in a way. Like I said before, I'll put little sticky notes every 50 pages because I am spatially aware of how much space 50 pages takes. And that gets me motivated, like, ooh, I'm gonna conquer this space and I'm gonna get to that next little finish line sticky note. But for some people, that's just overwhelming. Like you've got this big honking book and it's just humongous and it just feels really intimidating. That is a lot of space. That's a lot of pages. So if you're like that, where you're just intimidated by that, you could use an e-reader or read it on your phone or whatever. And that way you're not intimidated by this humongous book. It's just an e-reader. So you don't see that space. There is no space. You don't see how many pages that you're doing every day. You can't see how big the book is and then get all intimidated about it. And you can just chip away at those pages until you feel like you're finished reading. It doesn't matter so much about a goal of getting to that sticky note or whatever. For me, when I have a long book on an e-reader, I feel like I'm not accomplishing anything. Like, oh, I read 50 pages today, but I don't see the results. Like, I like to have that finish line that I'm getting up to, and then I see the results of how much I've gotten, and I've got this much left to go in the book, and that really motivates me to be like, haha, look at these increments and all of this progress. So that works for me, but for your personality type, you might feel more comfortable with an e-reader. Plus, with an e-reader, it's easy to carry around. You don't have this huge honking book that weighs 50 pounds. Another thing about reading classics is it's in a whole different time period in history than we're used to. And so there can be a lot of things in the story that are things that we don't know about, that we don't understand. And so do you take the time to stop and research that and look up that word and find out, what that thing is, or what that cultural thing is, or what that word means, or whatever that it is? Do you take the time to double check those things and research it a little bit? Or do you just kind of just let it slide by and just continue on with the story and just kind of let it wash over you and you're not worried about the details? And it might vary from book to book, and it might vary from chapter to chapter. Sometimes you see something and you are super confused and you just lost what's going on in the plot. You don't know what's going on anymore. And so maybe you do need to stop and kind of research, okay, why is it so important that this character has a barouche and this character has a carriage? What is the difference? Maybe that's important to the plot. I need to stop and find out. And other times it might just be something really small that doesn't seem to be very important. It's just kind of a throwaway comment or just sort of a throwaway description of a character, and it doesn't really have any bearing on the main plot, and so you can just kind of skip over it and continue on. On a case-by-case basis, you can stop and decide, do I want to take the time to Google this, or do I just not care? My last piece of advice is there's no pressure. There's no one forcing you to read this classic. You're doing it for enjoyment. You might get 50 pages in and then just decide, you know what, this is just not the time for this classic. This is just not what I'm wanting right now. And you might put it aside, and 5 years later, you pick it up again and try it again. Or maybe you never try it again. There's really no pressure here. You don't have to like every classic. You don't have to understand every classic. You don't have to enjoy every classic. You don't have to finish the big book. It's completely up to you. Guess what? You have the freedom to read whatever you like. Whew, that takes the pressure off, thank goodness. Hopefully some of these things are things that you can think about and figure out what motivates you, and maybe it'll make it not quite so intimidating to read some longer classics. Please leave me a comment down below and let me know what is the longest classic that you've ever read, or even just what is the longest book that you've ever read, and how did you get through it? Did you have like some sort of little tips or like little sticky notes or a schedule or something of how you got through it? Or you were just like, just read it whatever, no goals, no special, just, read a book. That's all it is. Leave me a comment down below and let me know, what has your experience been with reading long books? Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and remember, the right book in the right hands at the right time can change the world.